At my husband's funeral, I was the only one there. No flowers, no family, just a drizzle of rain falling steady against the black umbrella I bought for occasions that were never supposed to exist. My children didn't come. Daniel said he had a business dinner. Emily sent a text that read, "I'll light a candle from home." And that was the morning I realized love doesn't die with a person. It dies when the living stop caring. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. My name is Ruth Anderson. Before I tell you what happened after that day, I want to know something. Where are you listening from? I found that grief sounds different in every city, every country, but the silence is always the same. The sky that morning looked like wet ash gray, heavy and tired. I stood beside the casket, gloved hands trembling, and watched the rain blur my reflection on the polished wood. The preacher spoke, his voice muffled under the wind, saying things that felt borrowed from someone else's life. A devoted father, a loyal husband, he said, but the words bounced off the walls of that empty chapel like echoes that had no place to land. For 40 years, Henry and I built a life together. We didn't have riches, but we had rhythm Sunday breakfasts, road trips that always ended at the same diner, evenings spent listening to Sinatra by candlelight. We thought love, once built, would hold forever. But love, I've learned, doesn't always end in storms. Sometimes it fades quietly, like dust collecting on a once-favorite chair. I looked around, expecting, maybe hoping to see a familiar face appear late. Maybe Emily rushing in with guilt in her eyes. Maybe Daniel trying to hide behind sunglasses. But no one came. The only sound was the wet clatter of raindrops on metal chairs. When the service ended, the funeral director cleared his throat and asked, "Would you like a few more minutes, Mrs. Anderson?" I nodded, unable to speak. He left, and for a moment I stood alone, truly alone, beside the coffin of the man I loved more than anyone in this world. "Henry," I whispered, my voice cracking, "you deserved better than this." The truth was, I had seen it coming. The distance, the indifference. It started years ago when Henry got sick. Daniel, our eldest, would call from his office, always too busy to visit. Emily lived just 40 minutes away, but said the hospital made her anxious. I made excuses for them then. They have their own lives, their own worries. That's what mothers do. We justify, we forgive, even when our hearts are breaking in slow motion. But standing there in that cold chapel, I felt something shift inside me. The kind of stillness that comes after realizing you've been forgotten by the very people you built your world around. I remembered the nights Henry would ask, "Do you think they'll visit tomorrow?" And I'd lie, saying, "Of course, dear, they're just caught up with work." He'd smile weakly, and I'd hide the phone that never rang. When the pallbearers came to lower the casket, I pressed my hand to the lid. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of damp soil and lilies. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "Rest easy now." And then, as the dirt began to fall, one soft, hollow sound after another, I realized something else. I wasn't just burying my husband. I was burying the illusion of family I'd been clinging to. By the time I got home, the house felt too quiet. His slippers were still by the door. His coffee mug sat where he left it, stained from years of morning routines. I turned on the lamp, not because I needed light, but because I needed warmth, something, anything to fill the emptiness. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Henry's chair, the one that still held the faint scent of his cologne. And in that silence, heavy, complete, almost holy, I whispered to the empty room, "I'll make sure they remember what they've done." Because grief, I realized, isn't just about losing someone you love. Sometimes it's about finally seeing who never truly loved you back. The night before the funeral, the house smelled of rain and lemon polish, the scent of endings. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the funeral program spread before me, my reading glasses slipping down my nose, the clock ticking too loud in the quiet. 2 plates were set out, though I only needed one. I kept doing that, setting places for ghosts. I had spent all day cooking Henry's favorite soup, as if he might somehow walk through the door one last time, saying, "Smells good, Ruth." But all that came was silence. And then, my phone lit up Daniel's name glowing against the dark. For a moment, I felt relief. Finally. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice low and impatient. "Listen, about tomorrow, something came up." I froze. "Daniel, it's your father's funeral." "I know, but the board rescheduled our quarterly dinner. It's important." I swallowed hard. "Your father gave 30 years to that company. The least you could do." "Mom, don't make this harder," he interrupted. "You know how he was about appearances. He wouldn't want me missing work." Then came the sound I'll never forget, laughter in the background. A woman's laughter. "Is that someone with you?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Just colleagues. We're celebrating a new client." And that was it. The call ended with a hollow click. I sat there staring at the phone like it had betrayed me, too. The tea had gone cold. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the cup. I tried to convince myself that grief makes people act strange, that Daniel was just overwhelmed. But deep down, I knew better. An hour later, Emily texted, "I'll light a candle from home. Too many bad memories in that chapel." Bad memories? She meant the time she fainted during Sunday service when she was 12, or maybe the day Henry scolded her for skipping choir. Either way, I stared at that text until the words blurred. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. "You'll regret this. He loved you. Please, just come." But I sent nothing. The house felt heavier by the minute. The air carried that strange tension, the kind that comes before a storm, or before a heart finally cracks. I walked into Henry's study. Everything was still as he'd left it. His spectacles lay beside the ledger he never finished, the pen capped neatly. I traced my fingers over the spine of his books. Finance, architecture, gardening, the small monuments of a life lived with discipline and care. There was a photo on his desk. Henry, me, and the kids at the lake cabin. Daniel was 8, Emily 6. Henry had his arm around all of us, his smile soft and proud. I remember that day clearly. Emily caught her first fish and screamed until Henry helped her throw it back. Daniel had spent the afternoon building sandcastles and asking how inheritance worked. He was 8. 8. Even then, he was thinking about ownership. I sat in Henry's chair and whispered to the empty room, "What happened to us, Henry? When did love start needing reminders?" The wind outside howled like something mourning with me. I reached for the photo again, my hand trembling, and that's when I noticed a folded note tucked beneath the frame. It was in Henry's handwriting. "Ruth, if I go first, promise me one thing. Don't let them forget who they are." I pressed it to my chest and cried until my body felt hollow. He must have written it weeks before his passing, when he already knew the children were slipping away. By midnight, I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I called the funeral home to confirm the arrangements again, third time that evening. The director's voice was kind, gentle, the way people talk to the elderly when they don't know what else to say. "Yes, Mrs. Anderson," he said softly. "Everything is prepared. Are you sure there won't be any family members attending?" My throat tightened. "No," I said. "It'll just be me." After I hung up, I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Headlights occasionally flickered past, families heading home from late dinners or night shifts, lives still moving forward while mine had come to a full stop. I can't die. At 2 a.m., I went into Henry's room. I still couldn't call it my room, and laid out his favorite navy suit, the one he wore when we renewed our vows on our 30th anniversary. I ironed the cuffs and smoothed the tie, whispering, "You'll look handsome tomorrow, my love." The lamp cast a soft glow over the bedspread. For a second, it almost felt like he was sitting there again, quiet, smiling, alive. Then the light flickered, and the illusion broke. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring into the dim hallway, and thought, tomorrow I'll stand alone, but I won't forget. and I won't forgive easily. That was the last thought I had before the morning came, the morning everything changed. The morning after the funeral, the world felt unnaturally bright, the kind of light that doesn't match your grief. The sun pushed through the curtains, landing on Henry's empty side of the bed. I hadn't slept. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the clock that seemed louder than ever. I thought the hardest part was over, that burying him would bring some kind of peace. But peace, I learned, doesn't come when the world thinks it should. It comes when truth finally stands in the open. At 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. A man in a gray suit stood there, tall, polite, the kind of professional calm that feels rehearsed. "Mrs. Anderson?" "Yes?" "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Harlan. He asked me to deliver this." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from our family lawyer. Henry's will, it said, was ready to be reviewed. I was to meet Mr. Harlan at his office that afternoon. For a moment I just stared at the letter. I'd forgotten about the will. The word itself felt too final, too cold. Henry and I had spoken about it once, years ago when he first got sick. He promised to keep things simple. Everything, he said, would go to me because he trusted me to do right by the children. I made myself a cup of tea, dressed in my plain gray coat, and drove across town to the lawyer's office, the same building where Henry had signed countless contracts for his small construction firm. Mr. Harlan greeted me with his usual weary kindness. "Ruth," he said softly, "I'm so sorry for your loss." He gestured for me to sit, then slid a folder across the table. "Henry left everything in your name, the company shares, the house, the savings. It's all yours." I nodded slowly. That's what he always wanted. But before I could ask anything else, my phone buzzed. "Daniel." I hesitated, then answered. "Mom," he said, voice sharp. "I just spoke to Mr. Harlan. He said Dad's will left everything to you. That's not what Dad promised me." My chest tightened. "Daniel, your father." "Don't play dumb, Mom," he snapped. "He told me I'd take over the company. I ran it for the past 2 years while he was sick. How could you—" "Daniel, listen to yourself," I said quietly. "Your father wanted stability. He didn't want to leave the company in chaos." There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You manipulated him, didn't you? You got him to change it before he died." "Daniel," I said, shocked, "how dare you?" But he hung up before I could finish. The silence that followed was deafening. My hands shook so hard that I nearly spilled the tea the secretary had brought in. I took a deep breath and forced a smile at Mr. Harlan. "I'm sorry," I said. "He's grieving in his own way." But my gut told me it was something else. Not grief, anger, resentment, greed. As I left the office, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. The world outside kept moving, people walking, traffic lights changing, laughter spilling from a cafe across the street. It was almost cruel how normal everything looked. When I got home, another message waited on my phone. This time from Emily. "Mom, I can't believe you did this. Daniel told me everything. You turned Dad against us. You made sure we got nothing." I felt my knees weaken. I sank into Henry's chair, and pressed the phone against my chest. 2 children, 2 betrayals in less than an hour. Then a memory surfaced, a conversation from months earlier when Henry had been sitting at this very desk, coughing softly between words. "I'm leaving everything in your name, Ruth. Daniel's been careless with the business. I don't want Emily caught up in his mess. Promise me you'll take care of things fairly." "Of course," I'd said. "But they'll understand, won't they?" He'd given a tired smile. "If they don't, the truth will show itself." I didn't understand what he meant back then, but now, as I looked at the phone, at the venom in my children's words, I began to see it. Someone had lied to them. And then another thought hit me like a cold wind. Henry had trusted Daniel with access to some of the company's documents before he passed, including the will drafts. My fingers curled into fists. "Henry," I whispered, staring at the framed photo on the mantel. "What did he do?" Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the dried leaves across the porch. Inside, I felt something settle deep inside me, a mix of dread and determination. If Daniel had tampered with his father's last wish, I would find out. I owed Henry that much. And for the first time since the funeral, my tears stopped falling. By the next morning, I'd stopped shaking. Grief had burned itself down to something sharper, something clean and cold, like a blade finally revealed under ash. I spent the early hours pacing the kitchen, clutching Henry's note in one hand and my phone in the other. Daniel hadn't called back. Emily hadn't either, but I wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. I needed truth. By 9, I'd decided. I was going to see Daniel face to face. He lived in the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked identical, trimmed within an inch of its life. His house was big, modern, and sterile, all glass and angles, like someone had built it to be admired but never lived in. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt an odd mix of dread and maternal instinct. Part of me still wanted to fix things. The other part wanted answers. When the door opened, Chloe, his wife, stood there. Early 30s, perfectly styled, her perfume hit before her words did. She smiled the way people do when they want you to leave quickly. "Oh, Mrs. Anderson, what a surprise." "I'd like to see my son," I said. Her eyes flickered. "He's busy right now." "I'll wait." Before she could protest, I stepped inside. The house smelled like coffee and stress. Papers cluttered the kitchen counter. Voices, muffled but tense, came from the study down the hall. I took a step closer. "Daniel, we can't keep this up." Chloe's voice, sharp, shaking. "Just trust me," Daniel hissed. "Once the assets transfer, it'll be fine." I froze. Transfer assets? My pulse quickened. And then before I could move, the door swung open. Daniel's face appeared older than I remembered, but not wiser. His tie hung loose, his eyes red. "Mom," he said, startled. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said evenly. "You hung up on me yesterday." He exhaled hard, rubbing his temples. "This isn't a good time." I took in the mess around him, stacks of unpaid bills, a laptop with spreadsheets open, a half-empty whiskey glass. "No," I said. "I think it's the perfect time." He looked at Chloe, who hovered behind him, her arms crossed. "Go upstairs," he muttered. But Chloe didn't move. Her voice cracked slightly. "Maybe you should just tell her, Daniel." His jaw tightened. "There's nothing to tell." I stepped forward. "Your father trusted you with his company's accounts, didn't he?" He glared at me. "Don't start with that." "Answer me." "Yes," he snapped. "I managed things when he got sick. He wasn't capable near the end." "Capable?" I repeated softly. "He signed his name clearly on every check, every document. I saw him." Daniel's voice rose. "Mom, you don't understand how business works." I held his gaze. "Then explain why Mr. Harlan said the last version of the will was printed from your email." That silenced him. For a second, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the tick of a wall clock. "Finally," he said. Dad was confused. He told me he wanted to make adjustments. I just helped him. "Helped him?" I whispered. "By erasing his wife from his final wishes?" His expression twisted anger mixed with guilt. "You don't know what it's like watching everything fall apart. The company's drowning in debt. I was just trying to keep it alive." Chloe stepped closer, voice trembling. "He's telling the truth about the debt, but the loans he didn't tell you about those, did he?" Daniel turned sharply. "Chloe, stop!" But she didn't. "He took out personal loans under the company's name, Ruth. Then he panicked when the payments came due. He thought he could fix it before anyone found out." My stomach dropped. I looked at Daniel, my boy, my little boy who used to build sandcastles beside Henry, now a man cornered by his own choices. "Did you forge your father's signature?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. That silence was enough. I took a deep breath. "You could have asked for help, Daniel. We would have found a way together." He looked away. "You don't get it. You've already had your life. This company, this legacy, it's mine now." There it was. The poison that had been festering all along, entitlement disguised as inheritance. I nodded slowly, my voice steady. You're right about one thing. You've made it yours, but not the way your father intended. I turned to leave. Chloe whispered, I'm sorry, as I passed. Outside, the air hit my face like a cold slap. I walked to my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. For the first time in my life, I didn't see Daniel as my son. I saw him as the man who betrayed Henry and me. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked at the house one last time, shining, perfect, hollow, and thought, if he's chosen money over truth, then truth will be the thing that undoes him. That night, I made a decision. I was going to find proof, not for revenge, but for peace, for Henry. And deep down, I knew Henry had left me something, some trail he wanted me to find. That night, the house felt alive with ghosts. Every shadow in Henry's study seemed to move with purpose. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like his footsteps returning. But grief doesn't bring people back. It only sharpens what they've left behind. I poured myself a cup of tea, though I didn't drink it. The clock on the mantel read 11:47 p.m. I hadn't turned on any lights except the one above Henry's old desk, the same lamp that had glowed through years of his late-night work. The smell of his cologne still lingered faintly in the wood. I ran my fingers along the drawers, each one labeled in his careful handwriting. Invoices, contracts, receipts. I wasn't looking for money or records. I was looking for him. The third drawer stuck halfway. When I tugged harder, something clinked behind it. I reached in and pulled out a small metal box. Inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a USB drive. On it, written in Henry's unmistakable penmanship, were 2 words, for Ruth. My heart thudded. I plugged it into his old desktop, the one Daniel had once called ancient. The screen flickered to life, humming softly. There were 5 audio files, each named simply by date, the last one only 2 days before Henry died. My hand trembled as I clicked play. Ruth, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain everything. His voice frail, rasping but unmistakably his, filled the room. I covered my mouth, afraid the sound itself might break me. Daniel has been moving funds between accounts. I confronted him about it last week. He promised it was temporary, that he'd fix it before the board noticed. But I saw the panic in his eyes, Ruth. I know that look. He's hiding something bigger. The recording paused briefly, the shuffle of papers audible in the background. Emily. She's been distant. I tried to tell her to stay away from Daniel's mess, but she only visits when she needs something. I don't blame her, I spoiled her, and she learned convenience instead of care. My eyes burned, tears blurring the screen. I've changed my will, Ruth. Everything goes to you, not because I doubt them, but because I trust you to do what's right when I'm gone. You've always seemed clearer than the rest of us. If they ever accuse you, and they will remember this, the truth always rises, even if it has to crawl through mud first. The file ended with a faint cough, followed by silence. I sat there frozen, the weight of his voice pressing on my chest. For months, I'd blamed myself for not keeping the family close, for not trying harder. But now, for the first time, I saw it clearly. The distance hadn't started with me. It had started the moment our children learned to measure love in numbers instead of moments. I opened the next recording. It was shorter. Daniel's been meeting with someone from the bank. He thinks I don't know. I tried to warn him that forged documents never stay buried, but he's too far gone, Ruth. If he doesn't stop, he'll destroy himself and the company with him. The final recording was dated just 1 day before Henry's death. If I don't wake tomorrow, please don't hate them. They're lost, not evil, but make sure they face the truth, even if it breaks them. I want them to remember what integrity looks like, even if it comes too late. The tears came freely now, falling onto the keyboard. I closed my eyes and let his words settle into the hollow places inside me. For months, I'd begged for closure. Tonight, I'd been given something else, clarity. I sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the computer, thinking of the man who had always believed that honesty mattered more than comfort. And then I noticed one more file in the folder, a document named Ledger_F. It contained every bank transfer Daniel had made in the last 6 months, the ones he'd claimed didn't exist. Henry had copied everything before he died. I smiled through my tears. "You clever man," I whispered. "You knew I'd need this." When I looked out the window, the rain had started again, tapping softly on the glass like a heartbeat. I whispered into the quiet, "Don't worry, Henry. They'll remember, not because I'll scream, but because I'll show them what you left behind." That night, I made another silent promise, one that hummed, louder than grief itself. Tomorrow, I would begin the reckoning. Morning came pale and gray, the kind of light that slips quietly through the curtains without warmth. I hadn't slept. I didn't need to. There's a strange calm that comes after you stop being afraid when pain hardens into purpose. That's where I was now. I printed every document Henry had left me, every transaction, every forged signature, every memo Daniel had tried to bury. The evidence sat in a neat folder on the kitchen table beside 2 coffee mugs and a vase of lilies, Henry's lilies. When I called Mr. Harlan, our lawyer, his voice cracked through the line. "Ruth, where did you find all this?" "In Henry's study," I said. "He wanted the truth protected." He sighed. "I always suspected Daniel was altering things, but without proof." "Well," I said, sliding my finger over Henry's note, "now we have proof." By afternoon, I had made my decision one that Henry would have called bold. I invited both of my children for dinner. I told them it was time to talk about the estate. Daniel replied within minutes. "Fine. I'll come by 7. Emily took longer. "I'll come too, but only because I want to hear your side." Their tone told me everything. They weren't coming to reconnect. They were coming to collect. That evening, I set the table exactly as I used to when they were kids. Candles, polished cutlery, the old china with the faint cracks only I could see. The air smelled of rosemary chicken and old memories. I even put Henry's chair back at the head of the table. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Daniel first dressed sharply, confidence draped around him like armor. Emily arrived moments later, eyes tired, phone in hand, perfume too sweet for the occasion. They barely looked at each other. Whatever alliance they'd formed through anger had already begun to fray. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice clipped, "can we skip the small talk?" I gestured to the table. "Sit, both of you." They did. I poured water, not wine. I wanted clear minds tonight. "I know what you both think," I began. "That your father changed the will because of me. That I manipulated him, but you're wrong." Daniel smirked. "We've already heard your version." I nodded slowly, reached for the folder and laid it in front of them. "Then maybe you should hear his." Emily frowned. "What is this?" I pressed play on my phone. Henry's voice, steady, tired, unmistakable, filled the room. "Ruth, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't get to explain everything. Daniel has been moving funds." The color drained from Daniel's face. Emily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "I changed my will. Everything goes to you, Ruth, not because I doubt them, but because I trust you to do what's right." Silence. Thick. Immovable. Daniel stood up suddenly, knocking his chair backward. "You had no right." I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. "He had every right, and so do I." He took a step toward me, face flushed. "You went through his private things." "They weren't private," I said, rising to meet his eyes. "They were meant for me, for this moment." Emily's voice trembled. "Daniel, is it true? The loans?" He glared at her. "Don't you start. You've done nothing but judge." "Judge," I said quietly. "She may have turned away, but she didn't steal from her father." Daniel's lips parted to argue, to deflect, but no sound came out. I slid the printed records across the table. "Your forged transfers, your signatures, the same ones the bank will see when I send this to them tomorrow morning." He stared down at the pages, the confidence in his eyes finally cracking. "This will ruin me," he said. "No," I said, voice low. "You did that yourself. I'm just the witness." Emily began to cry, softly whispering, "What have we done?" I looked between them, my children, once so bright, now hollowed by greed, and for the first time I didn't feel anger, just sadness. "You didn't just bury your father," I said. "You buried your decency." No one spoke after that, not even when the candles flickered out, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Emily's quiet sobs. Daniel left first, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. Emily followed soon after, her apology a whisper that barely reached me. When the house finally fell silent, I sat alone again at the head of the table, Henry's chair beside me, and let the night breathe. I didn't cry, I didn't call anyone. I simply folded the folder shut, placed it in Henry's drawer, and whispered, "You were right, my love. The truth always rises." And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not joy, not peace, but closure, stretching its arms slowly around the ruins of what used to be a family. The next morning, the world looked different. Not softer, not kinder, just clearer. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the sky washed clean. The garden outside glistened, Henry's roses heavy with dew. I stood by the window, wrapped in his cardigan, watching the light stretch slowly across the yard. For months, every morning had felt the same, gray, lifeless, heavy. But today there was something new in the air, something like stillness that wasn't empty anymore. The house was quiet. Not the cruel kind of quiet that comes after loss, but the calm that follows truth. The folder with Daniel's papers still lay on the table, sealed now, ready for Mr. Harlan. I'd already written the letter that would finalize everything: the sale of the company, the transfer of funds, the donations. Half of what Henry built would go to a local foundation, a scholarship for children of small business owners who'd lost their parents too soon. The other half would secure my small new life, simple, honest, uncomplicated. As I signed the final page, I whispered, "You can rest now, Henry. It's done." The sound of my own voice startled me. It had been so long since I'd spoken without trembling. I poured coffee, just one cup, and took it outside to the porch. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh beginnings. Across the yard, a robin perched on the fence, pecking gently at the puddle that reflected the pale morning sky. For years, I'd measured my worth by the people I'd raised, by whether they called, whether they showed up, whether they still needed me. But sitting there, coffee warming my hands, I realized something. Sometimes, the people you love the most will never understand the depth of what you gave them. And that's not failure, it's truth. I wasn't angry at Daniel anymore. I wasn't even angry at Emily. I pitied them, in a way. They had confused success with salvation. They had mistaken money for memory, power for purpose. But one day, maybe when they were standing at their own empty tables, they'd understand.